So everyone, welcome to the Goa School and thank you for doing this little chat around why elections are important. This is election season in India, and in fact, in many parts of the globe. And so, it's a topic that's a hot topic at the moment. And for our country, we will soon, I think, with the last phase of elections. So tomorrow, we will have elections around in Delhi and places, and then we will have a result that comes to us on the 4th of June. So it's really topical. And so thank you for making the time to do this now with us. So I want to welcome Paloma. Paloma is our head of operations, and a lot of the Goa School people already know her. I want to welcome Amar Habibullah, who we all know as a businessman in Lucknow and who's also has a very active political profile. And similarly for Sandeep Seth, again, a businessman in Lucknow and has a very sharp political brain as well. So I think having this discussion will be of great benefit for those of us who are perhaps fence sitters or perhaps not sure, why we want to be political, and see at the end of this where we want to go. So let's begin. Our first question is, why are elections indeed important? So let's go around the table for that. Who wants to go first? Shall we go in this order? Amar, Sandeep, Paloma, and myself? Okay, Amar. Why are elections important?
Before we start the discussion, do you know that these are the longest elections ever held in independent India?
The longest elections ever?
2.5 months of elections that we've just had have been the longest. Yeah, yes. ever in independent India's history. So it makes one think, with all the technology we boast about, we seem to be regressing in our basics. Yeah. As far as elections are concerned, of course, it is the right of every individual or every citizen to choose who he wants to lead the government, and the choice is made between the different people standing up for elections. And in an ideal scenario, what you do is you vote for your MP in your area, looking at what benefits he can bring to your area, and you vote for the MP, and the MP then goes in turn and votes for the Prime Minister, and then you have the Prime Minister forms his government, and that's how it runs. Yeah. But the main thing and the most important thing is why elections are important is it gives you, the individual, the power to choose your elected leadership. Without it, you would not be able to change anything in the country, because you would not be able to elect your own leaders.
Right. Okay, so you're saying that it gives you a voice in the way your own country is governed, right? Okay. Sandeep, why do you think elections are important?
Yeah. Well, see, in a democracy where you have to, let's talk about India as a democracy. What does the preamble of our constitution says? We form a government for the people, of the people, and or whatever the third one is, by the people, correct? which is why you hold elections. And so, saying that, when people have a choice to contest, that means it gives you a choice to contest elections. I mean, if one wants to be in the governing system and in the government to conduct the way the country will function, or at least do whatever he can for his whatever he's looking after. So he's allowed to, a normal citizen is allowed to contest elections. So you can also go and contest. And of course, it's everybody else's right to vote for the person who he chooses or likes to for his leadership in whichever way it is. So election in a democracy is essentially to form a government which will run the show. That's to put it as simply as that. Now, it's why are they important is because I think for every individual living in a democracy, if you do hear people saying, I'm not into politics and that doesn't really bother me, and it's nothing that I'm really caring about, I'm going along with my life. But why it is so important is because once in a democracy, once you elect a certain bunch of people to run the show for you, the decisions that they take will immediately impact your life. So therefore, they are extremely important so that you can run your life the way you want to, even if you don't want to be in the governing body or anything of that sort. So even if you don't take part in elections, as in trying to contest for a post, you should always, one should vote and be otherwise a part of the election. Therefore, that's why it's essentially very, very important to vote, and therefore it's very important for everybody in a democracy.
Right. Paloma.
So yes, why elections are important. I think that as Sandeep has also said, when you live in a country and you're working in a country, there are certain things that you're happy with, and someone has chosen to make those things happen for you. The same way, when you're not happy with something, somebody else has chosen to make things the same way. So if you want to choose whether you're happy or not, by making a vote or by voting, that helps to have the higher ups actually change it in one way or the other. So you're making things happen by voting.
Right. So I think all of us are not using the word, but the word possibly is holding people accountable also in government. So the vote actually helps you to, to vote people in or out of power, depending on how they behaved in the last little while. So in a sense, you are not only making a choice for how you're governed in a benign way, but you're also saying we want to have you stay because you did the right things, or you not stay because you didn't do the right things. So it's a way of holding your government to account as well. Now, there's a really important word that we all used also, I think, called democracy. And, I mean, there seems to be this unwritten code that democracies are better than other forms of government. And the reason for this is because then you still have the freedom to say how you want to be governed as opposed to being told how it's going to be, which is how dictatorships work. And there's a whole plethora of varieties of governance in the middle. I mean, it's a continuum, obviously. So, keeping these two things in mind, my next question is around the word secularism. Now, one of the things that we've noticed in our own election season is that this is perhaps one of the most deeply polarized elections we've had, at least in my lifetime, right? And the voices on all sides of the argument are so terribly sort of extreme and pitted against each other that there seems to be a bit of a fight. Now, this is a good thing in a way that when somebody explains an issue which is polarized, which means you see one side of it and the opposing side of it, it helps you clarify your own mind and for you to make up your own mind about where you stand on certain issues. So in a way, that debate is good. But in the process, what's happening is that people are getting hugely divided. So can we all have a round of comments on why we think that perhaps we are moving away from a secular country, and is that what is dividing people? Or if you think there's another reason completely as to why they're being divided? Okay.
See, as far as secularism, sorry, do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Or are you going the other way around this time?
No.
See, as far as secularism is concerned, and democracy is concerned, they go very well together, hand in hand. But as far as dictatorship is concerned, and non-secularism, or finding an enemy amongst your own people is concerned, that goes very well hand in hand together too. So if we are moving towards a dictatorship and we want to move away from democracy, we would be more and more inclined, like we saw what happened in Germany, we more and more inclined to the part of the society, and by doing so, move away from secularism. Whereas if we want to strengthen democracy, we try and include everybody into democracy. That's the whole idea of democracy, is to include everybody. By including everybody, you automatically move towards secularism.
Right. Sandeep?
See, secularism is a very important part of democracy because you have to, as Amar mentioned, you want to include everybody. So there are times where people can be larger in number. There are times where people can be smaller in number to make up the democracy. So secularism, I mean, some people can be following a different faith. I mean, there are various reasons why. Therefore, secularism, where you include everybody, every religion, every caste, so that they're given equal opportunity to enjoy the benefits of a democracy, a vibrating democracy. That is why secularism is very important. What you are witnessing today, as in India, what is exactly happening, though it's a very secular country, and in fact, diversified on various fronts. But still, what are we gunning for? The largest majority people, which are the Hindus, they are being polarized to vote together so that they can rule about the rest. That is not fair as such. So therefore, secularism is very, very important to maintain in a democracy.
So it's almost in a sense the opposite of this word majoritarianism, right? Which is
Correct.
also banded around, which basically means that if the majority of the people belong to one faith or one kind of, say, whatever. I mean, there's another party that's trying to divide people on the basis of caste, and they're saying that look, the lower castes and castes are the majority, and things should work in favor of them, right? And these are also the poorest people in our country. So, so the majoritarianism basically means, who are the majority and what do they need? And in getting what they need, are they actually trampling the rights of those who are
Correct.
not in the majority? So, in a sense, it's the opposite. Secularism is I mean, secularism actually means to remove religion from state. I mean, as far as I understand it, and make sure that we don't use religion and perhaps in our context also caste as a way to get people to vote on things or to to believe that they belong to one cohort or the other. And that is actually what is polarizing everybody, right? If you go to see, because people are identifying with their religions or their regions or their castes much quicker than, say, what they believe the issues of development need to be, which could be something which is across all of these, like, unemployment or poverty or, I don't know, there's several things really. I mean, there's income gaps, and we can talk about all these things in a while. Okay, so Paloma, I realize I've jumped in, so please say something. I didn't
No,
go
no, that's
according
fine.
to the.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to how we think about like equality and equity as well. Like, when you want everything to be fair for everyone, but everyone's at a different level or at a different viewpoint. So how do you make it, equal across, that everyone feels that they're getting the best out of the government? That's all I
Yeah.
would say.
I remember in the Goa School, we used to actually show this one diagram to explain the difference between equity and equality, which is that equality is that you assume everyone is equal. And so if you want everyone to look over the fence at football match, you give them one cube of, like a stool to stand on. But then you don't realize that some people are short to begin with, so they won't be able to look over the fence anyway. So actually, they need to have a higher stool. So that is equity, where you give more to certain sections, so that they can then be at a level playing field with the others, right? So these are also really some really important sort of concepts that are bound up with the idea of
But you see, one sec. But
yeah.
majoritarianism should not be confused with caste-based election fighting. Whereas majoritarianism is exclusive, which means it excludes people. Caste-based politics is more inclusive. It wants to include those castes into the whole system. So there's actually a big difference between majoritarianism and caste-based politics. It's actually totally opposite of each other.
Correct. Um, yeah,
And
so
that
I
difference,
talking about inclusion, I mean, I wouldn't use the word caste based. I would just say inclusion of people from all sections.
So, for example, I myself, when I was growing up, was very anti the Mandal Commission implementation. Yeah, but after finding out majoritarianism, how that works, I'm totally in favor of the mandal reporting as well as caste, including caste into the whole mainstream of Indian political life.
So I guess you're talking about what they call affirmative action. The Mandal Commission is
Yes.
about that
Yeah.
same thing, that you give extra. It's almost like you give a bit extra for communities that have never had it, so that they can participate in that democracy at the same level as everyone else, right? So
Yes.
affirmative
Yes.
action was so yeah, and that sort of was one of the ways to get rid of the inequities in society. Okay, so
That's right. That's right.
yeah. Okay, so I'm just thinking, sitting here, that we've used all these big words and big concepts, etc., but we can actually zoom out from all of that, and the umbrella concept is possibly around human rights, where you're saying that
Yeah.
everybody has a right to live in dignity and sort of wellness and have the right to development, and our constitution, for example, is where all of our rights as Indians is enshrined. So it really draws from that, and it is from those value systems that then you get all of the other actions that ought to take place in a perfect democracy, right? So yeah, now let me just move a little bit away from that whole sort of big picture thing, and start getting a little more personal, because when you're growing up, you mentioned, Amar, when you were younger also, and also when I was younger, I didn't quite realize what everybody's fear on the Mandal Commission in those days used to be that we won't get jobs. But of course, luckily for us, at least I was from the generation where, sort of India opened up, there were jobs for everybody, we didn't have this massive demographic dividend that we have now. And so the competition was perhaps a bit less, or we didn't think so then, of course, but now I mean, looking back, possibly that was true. And we all benefited from the economic development that took place in our country in those years. It was the sort of in the 90s and 2000. But now, of course, the country is in a place where we really have uh, a lot of people who are sitting in that 35 and under age group. We do have, a situation where jobs. I think we've got the highest ever unemployment in on record for India, and we've got a situation where there's so many people who still can't access basic things like health and education. Remember those rights we were talking about? So those are things that every Indian has the right to have, but then can't always get for a variety of reasons. Now, when it comes to being politically active and having a political bent of mind, if you actually push yourself to think about how we are being governed, then what can happen is that those things that are your rights can actually come to you in a much quicker, faster, better manner. And that's the reason why it's, I think, important for all of us to be active during this election season, or at least one of the reasons. So let's just go back to our own personal stories and talk about how we all became a little bit more politically aware, and what was it that pushed us into thinking about politics, and why is it that perhaps we are in one of those circles now where we do talk about politics a lot. So let's go in the same order: Amar, Sandeep, and Paloma, and then.
So when I was, again, go back to when we were growing up, I actually was at a stage when I was in college. Mandal Commission came out, and I was against Mandal Commission at that point of time, like I told you. However, as I grew, politics faded away into the sidelines, mainly because politicians, the way I thought it had got streamlined in terms of politicians were making decisions based on how many roads you're supposed to have and what kind of lighting you're supposed to have, and basic civil kind of work, because all the policies and all were pretty much set as far as the country was advancing. Yeah. So like liberalization had happened, so we knew the economic policy was fair. We knew the judiciary was going along in a smooth manner. We knew the military was doing its job. So all these things were pretty much set. It wasn't a start that we needed to be all very concerned about which way we were headed. We knew which way we were headed, and so the less government involvement, or the less political involvement that we had, was perfectly all right, and it pushed in the side. I mean, in the end of the day, you're voting for a street light outside your house is not a very major decision that one has to take, or your drainage is not working and you need it cleaned. But politics at one stage of life had come to that kind of a degree where everything was set in terms of whichever party came to power, you knew that they would be serving the nation and wanting to take the nation forward. However, over the years, what's happened is that suddenly that continuity has broken. And we see that the government has started meddling into all sorts of policies that were already set and wants to redefine those. Now, once you want to redefine your education system, you want to redefine your health system, you need to redefine your military, you want to redefine everything under the sun. Then you suddenly start saying, but I'm not too sure what this government's capabilities are. Are these even educated people who are doing this? You go back to a scene of when India got independence, and where everybody was active in politics at that point of time, of how they wanted to see their country grow and into the future. And we had got to that point where we were all comfortable with how the country was growing. Obviously, there were shortcomings, but we knew that somebody was handling those shortcomings. To suddenly find that no, we want to have a total reset. And if we want to have a total
One second,
reset,
hang
if
on a
we
minute.
don't get involved,
Yeah, but there are, I mean, listen, I mean, if I can just jump in, I think the whole point about politics is that you do take a serious look at the way things are going. And if they haven't gone too well and you want to have a serious rehaul, then that is also fine. I mean, if you look at the new education policy, you will see people who have been in the education system for years who will say that on paper it is a great policy. And a lot of heads were consulted and put, all of their ideas were put into that policy. So, in a sense, politics is about change, and it's never that everything was going fine, possibly because it was benefiting you at the time, right? And there'll always be people who say we don't get a benefit from that, and for them
no,
to say
not
you want to relook is
sorry.
fine. I mean, that is what the political process is. I'm not challenging what you're saying. I'm just saying that the whole I mean, even if you say that, are these even educated people, for example, who are looking at the policies? Maybe not, but then the people who are so-called not educated will have a point of view or a perspective that perhaps others will never be able to see. And it's incumbent on the government to include all points of view, whether they're coming from educated quarters or not. And it may be that somebody has that experience and they can tell you how it's like in our families also when decisions are being made, somebody will say, I can tell you this is what it's going to be because, maybe that guy is your grandfather and he's kind of seen it all. But then there'll be younger people or there'll be other people who'll be like, listen, things have changed. We need to adapt. So I think all of that sort of has to be in the mix, as we go along.
I agree with you partly and partly not. Yeah. On the part that I agree with you, I do agree that change is essential. Change is very important to move forward. Change always happens, and it's good to change. Yeah. However, what I don't agree with you is on the point of a total reset of happening over the last year. You look at it as you have take no learnings from that, or you take no learnings from your neighborhood, and you try and implement policies which have failed, not only earlier but also in your neighborhood. Yeah, and which you can see quite clearly what the repercussions of those policies are going to be. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to get there.
Right. No, I agree with that. You have to take learning and you have to have some sort of memory, which of course we'll talk about when we talk about media and polarization again, which we need to in some detail. That people forget. But governments ought to remember, and there ought to be like a whole recording process by which, you can look back at previous documents and track policies and track, economic spending and track budgets and sort of do an analysis around, I mean, that's the next level, where you don't keep forgetting what happened in even the last sort of election years, but you actually track over time what has happened and what has benefited us, and therefore what we can implement.
To simplify this thought is like if you jump off a 4-story building, you will most likely kick the bucket. Now, I mean, do we need to go jump off the 4-story building to check if we're going to die? I mean, maybe, but logically, you'd say, please don't jump off the 4-story building, you're going to die.
Yeah. Correct. Okay, anyway, so this is getting a bit esoteric because, as we decided at the beginning of this talk that we weren't going to make it about people, but just about principles. Sandeep, please jump in here. I can see you're itching to say
Yeah,
something.
sure. No, as far as I'm concerned, I was a regular guy, like as Amar mentioned, not really politically inclined, and I've been occasions where I've gone and voted because the people I went with, they said vote for so and so, so I voted for so and that kind of a what a regular person generally is. But what woke me up to the political landscape and the reality of politics and why one should really be concerned about it and not just be a casual passerby is when, very frankly, when this current regime of the country came into power in 2014. And in fact, I was very keen and looking forward to them coming in because of all that I'd heard about the Gujarat model and how they are so fast paced and, they kind of leave out the redundant old elephant kind of working style that, has been working in this country. But very soon, after kind of they got into power, I realized that there is something which is moving a bit too fast, and there are a few policy decisions which I noticed, especially the first policy decision on the real estate market, which they took, and which kind of totally collapsed the entire uh, kind of population working in that segment, and it kind of revamped the whole scenario, and it that kind of woke me up. I said, "What's going on here? I mean, you don't make such large decisions where um, almost the small and the medium players totally get wiped out and are stuck, and they can't. You That's kind of unfair for any government to do." That's when I kind of woke up to reality, and then I started looking at the policies that were coming in. As Amar mentioned, everything was working very, very peacefully and calmly, and things were going along. I didn't have to really be bothered. But I have figured that there's something one need to look into because these guys came in with a huge promise of this and that. But what I'm seeing is disruptive kind of politics, especially on the economic front, and that just continued right up to 2016. When they came up with the demonetization, which just totally kind of changed the whole landscape. So I had already woken up by that time, and so by the time demonetization happened, I was like screaming in awake. I said, "What the hell's going on?" One needs to figure out what is happening. These are some mysterious things which are happening and nobody's ever heard of. And then I read up about demonetization, and I read up about what the economic impact it has and can have, and I was petrified. And exactly what we are facing now. That's really what woke me up. So I mean, I would not blame a guy who's casual till about 40, not really bothered about which political party is because I've been there myself, and but that's all right till as long as you have ethical people running the show and things are moving smoothly. At a small
Okay, so hang on because I just want to dial back a bit because something you said was very important was that your government and its decisions have to benefit the smallest and medium players, you know, first. And perhaps what some of us are seeing in this current scenario is that that's not happening. And you're talking from the point of view as someone who's been impacted by some of these, what you're calling sort of not very good policies, right? Like demonetization. But if you look at it from another point of view, you will have people who are telling you that it's the most righteous thing for us to, for example, maybe move towards, say, a Hindu nation, which is what we are in majority. And the reason they will give you is because we've never actually been able to, what is the word? We've never actually been able to sort of have a sense of Hindu pride, because we've had British people governing us, we've had a whole Mughal era, etc., etc., and our own sense of Hinduism is never come out. And this is a whole faction of people, for example, who might be saying, "Oh, let's get 400 seats this time, get rid of the word secular, and become less Hindu." So that's the other extreme. Now, for a lot of people who tend to fall in that camp, the disruption needs to occur. Because perhaps they're under the false impression that that it's a good idea to mix politics with religion. But the disruption also needs to occur in the sense that something needs to change big time so that the growth and the development and the sense of dignity needs to be restored to vast majority of people in our country who have never had it, right? So let me just stop there and get everybody's comments, but we're going to go with Paloma first. I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off. I don't mean to do that. All right. So Paloma, your turn, and then we'll go back down the field.
When you don't put a vote in, you're not really changing or making the path for you or for those that come before or with you. So when people talk about politics, it's like everyone is corrupt and everyone's doing things that benefit themselves only. And you know, if you're only doing things to benefit yourself, then obviously the smaller or the middle don't get a say in what happens. So I think that is when I started thinking about, yes, you know, like it is important to put a vote in and to choose a person who actually thinks about everyone and not just themselves, which is very difficult in politics anyway. When it comes to thinking about like the income gaps, I think India is like such a huge and vast country, and it is like now the largest. Trying to make things better for everyone is a Herculean task. And obviously you're always going to have people that are not happy. But I think, you know, one thing to think about is just when you're pitting someone against the other, that's definitely a wrong thing to do. But, you know, try to help everyone be more understanding of where the other person comes from, then that is like the way forward.
Yeah. We are saying, we are talking about issues, and somebody said, you know, onions make politicians cry in our country. And the background for this is really the price of onions, right? So, you know, onion is sort of taken as a staple. If it's that expensive, then the poorest of us can't afford it. And really, you know, it becomes a signature for like inflation, how the economy is doing, what's happened, et cetera, et cetera. So, but because of this huge income gap, then what's happening is that if the government is not actually saying, hey, so far our systems appear to have only benefited a certain lot of people and not the rest, then there needs to be some reorientation we need to do for our policies that actually, you know, takes the smallest people.
Just as a matter of fact, the inequalities today that exist in India are probably larger than they existed in the British days. Now let that sink in. Yeah, India in time of the Raj had less inequality of income than we have today.
But what is the reason for that?
All the work that's been done for the last 70 years, barring the last 10, has gone totally to zilch if this fact is true. So what that basically means is that life under the British Raj for a regular person was not as bad as it is today.
I don't know what that means, Amar, because honestly, it could mean that everyone was just flatly poor. And now, in the last 70 years, some people have come out to become super rich.
The Nizam of Hyderabad was the richest person in the world. You know the British Raj, right? It was not sometime. It was not. These are facts that are available, right?
Okay, I don't know enough about this comment.
The Nizam of Hyderabad was the richest person in the world at the time of independence.
Right.
Yeah, because he had that diamond factories in Hyderabad, which were and in the Deccan, which were basically his source of wealth. Yeah.
So what you're saying, everyone was.
So if we look, sorry.
Are you saying everyone was as rich as that?
No, there were rich people as well as inequalities were less at that time than they are today. That today there are more inequalities. So I would think that the people are poorer on the whole today than they were at that point of time, not the other way around. And that any matrix that you go by, you know, you have a good, everybody talks about the GDP and this and the other and says we are the third largest economy or second largest economy, fourth largest economy. But as per capita income, we are one of the poorest countries in the world. And in fact, living in UP where we live is one of the poorest places in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to wake up, smell the coffee, and see how our policies in going forward can benefit a larger section of society. We cannot have blinders on and totally ignore all these issues and move towards a path which basically leads you only to one place and one place only, and that's the end of the whole thing, because a country cannot run with such kind of inequalities for a long period of time.
Right. Sandeep, what about
Yeah.
you?
See, as I mentioned, I only woke up to politics 10 years ago. I mean, as much as awake that I am today. But then when I started reading up and when I started understanding what is really going on, why such huge economic policy decisions which are disruptive in nature and which kind of is creating more inequality or at least subjecting certain section of society to extreme measures of doing business, and inequality as per their policy has to be increased because in order to maintain power they have to feed the handful few who will feed them back, which is happening as far as the, I mean, if I have to mention our country, electoral bonds case, which just came out recently. So that's exactly what's happening. I mean, what I read in 10 years' time, 9 years' time, I saw it just being played out. So that is what really woke me up. And I think everyone should wake up because everybody's impacted.
Um, today we gave rations to 80 crore people. Our country, the size of the total population of the country is about 140 crore. Yeah. As per government data, we have 10% poor people in this country.
10%.
So either we're giving, below poverty line people in this country. Yeah. So either we are giving rations to the rich people, which is like nearly 60% of the population, or we are lying about giving rations, or the number of 10% is wrong. Now we reach such a stage of confusion where neither can the government give you clarity on how many poor people we have living in India, neither can somebody tell us that, listen, okay, this is the poor people and these are the rations being given to them and this is how it's working. They take credit, the government seems to take credit for reducing poverty by a few million, which falls hollow on why are we giving rations to such a large population. And I actually know the rations are being given correctly to the people who basically are under poverty line. So are our numbers all wrong? What are we talking about? We can't form any policy if we don't have a straight approach to any number.
Right.
Now, I mean,
So let me just
in the end of the
jump
day,
in. Yeah, let me just jump in
Sorry.
here and give a basic way this thing works for those of us who are trying to figure it out, which is that, look, there is a certain amount of money that's picked up through various taxes, etc., which becomes what our government spends the money on, right? That's the pie that they have. Then they make a policy that says where this money should be spent and how it should be spent and in whose favor, right? And then we have a year about in which to do that. And then at the end of it, you have a budget cycle that comes down where again you allocate money depending on how you hit those targets and how you want to hit them in the future. And you have to make sure that your spending actually lines up with your policy so that you know that you are doing what you say, right? I mean, that's how it works.
That's
But
supposed
what
to work,
happens when you, I mean, just to explain now. But then what actually happens is, which shouldn't, is that, well, I mean, first let me say that another system that you have to have in place is that you actually have to have a system by which you can count those numbers properly. That what was the money that went down, what was the impact it had, who got it, etc., etc., and you put that in, by way of surveys, etc., etc., and proper data. And so this proper data needs to exist for us as citizens to actually analyze what's going on, because at the end of the day also, I mean, like if I say I don't have enough information, then nobody can, I mean, all elections, for example, are fought on a number of factors, and it's no one factor that determines an election. So you can have a sense of anti-incumbency, you can have somebody saying, no, the rural places have not been developed properly despite everything. You can say urban development has been botched. Somebody can say, no, for me, it's inequality. We're still a highly unequal society. Somebody else can say, look, I've been looking for a job for 10 years and I still haven't got a proper one. And so unemployment for me is the biggest issue. So really, everybody comes at it from different angles. But at the macro level, when citizens need to analyze what has the government done, is it saying what it's done, what it should, as it's promised, and then how can my vote count? You actually have to have all those data points in order to make a good analysis, right? And a lot of us, of course, don't have. And so in that sense, we have notions and we have opinions that come from possibly TV programs and national debates and things like that we're really, really good at. So yeah, I mean, I think
one thing I would like to point out here, Madhuri, one biggest indicator which is in front of everybody, which tends to be missed by most people, is that India is now from the 5th largest economy in the world heading towards the 3rd largest economy in the world. So we are a very big GDP country in the world. Now, having said that, you can be proud about that. Everybody talks about that. Oh, we're heading to we're being the 3rd largest economy in the world. Divide that GDP in the population. See the per capita income. We are one of the poorest countries in the world. We have a $2,600 per capita income in the world, per annum per people. So that itself, this particular data, GDP with per capita income, gives you the level of difference between the people of society. You see, that itself gives it to you. But it's not shown that way. People don't see it that way. They just talk about the GDP. They don't talk about the per capita income being generated per head in India, which itself gives away the inequality completely there in the country, which is only growing, especially in the past 10 years.
Yeah. So I totally agree. In fact, that's a really good segue for us to talk about the debates that happen in the public sphere. And for us, when we're listening to those, to really understand what data points are being given, why are they being given, what are they being used, what point of view are they being used to prop up? Because you can actually find data for anything. And then what is the truth under that? So for us to actually analyze and say, okay, look, who is saying that? What are their motivations? Why are they saying that? And to give you a small example, I mean, just recently, people have been talking about the elections are happening. I think Amar opened by saying that it's one of the longest elections in the world. And what's happened is that sort of on all these weeks of elections, what they're not putting out is the data that actually tells us how many people have gone to vote, how many people turned up in each place, without actually showing us the results. The results we're okay with if it comes out later. But what tends to happen then is that there becomes a sense of mistrust in that, if you can't see the data. It's a typical example, and it's one example of how data works, right? That if you're, and nowadays, we have computers and everything that allows you to look at the data right away, almost in real time. And if you can't see that data as citizens, then there is a sense of mistrust that builds up, right? It's almost like saying, you tell somebody, here's 100 rupees, please go buy breakfast with it. And it's your 100 rupees. At the end of the day, you need to know how that 100 rupees was spent. Was it spent on eggs? Was it spent on bread? Was there any change left over? Is that simple, right? So if you're a citizen, this is your money. This is, if you've either been somebody who's given your taxes and you need to know how it's spent, or somebody else who may not have paid the taxes, but whose right it is to receive certain benefits based on those taxes. And if you can't actually see what's happening behind the scenes and how the money was spent, then then you're at a loss. So I'm going to open it up again for observations around, how to analyze what's out there and to look at data, and what are the data points that maybe are more interesting to focus on as we.
This data example is a fine example of how, when I was growing up, I would always trust the government to come up with this data and release it the next day as it was happening. However, in today's day and age, sorry?
You're talking about the election commission data.
Election commission data. In the past, it used to happen that after the day of voting, you would get the data by the next day of how many people voted, what the percentage was, and everything else. Now, when I was growing up, this process was working fine. Now, in today's, and that's why I say it's much more important to be politically involved today, suddenly that data has stopped. Now, nobody knows why the data has stopped. And in fact, today is the hearing in the Supreme Court about it.
Yes.
So, like I said, you're restarting everything. You just said, okay, forget this. This data is coming. Doesn't matter if somebody sees it, doesn't see it. We just don't want to publish it. You saw what happened with electoral bonds. The bank said, no, we can't publish data. It came in the next day. We know, all of us understand technology today. We know most information, barring a little bit, is available at your fingertips across the board, either through Google or through Chat GPT or through your banks. Anywhere you can just get basic information instantly. So in
Yeah.
today's day and age, to say that, listen, this data is not available because nothing can happen, while this was happening before, is totally uncredible or misleading, if not dishonest. Yeah, because it's a simple thing. It's a simple thing that you need.
Yeah.
And if this is not happening today, like I said, I would not be. I mean, I would use the strong word as dishonest also in this case. Yeah. But these kind of things were not happening when I was growing up, and that's why I was not that interested in this. Now I see it happening. I see it happening in front of my eyes, and that's why I need to be more involved with the politics going forward.
Yeah. That's a yeah. Okay, so Paloma, it's your turn, but I'm going to jump and give you another thing to talk about as well, which is this morality idea. I mean, if everything stems from the point of view of the value system that we have, that every human is equal, every Indian citizen is equal, everyone deserves the same thing, and then to hide things from certain sections of society, or to say they don't deserve to know because either, I don't know, they're educated or they don't care. I remember yesterday, actually, if I could just give an example, again, on one of these talks, somebody was saying, but the data is given to the Pratyashi, who is the candidate. And somebody actually had to say, I think it was Anjali Bharadwaj, I could send her a copy of this later. She had to say, but listen, the elections are not for the candidate, they are for the citizen. So therefore, the data has to go to the citizen, not to the candidate, right? And she was like, how is it that nobody has made that connection? What are they fighting about? So Paloma, your turn, and speak a little bit also, in addition to the rest, about this idea of morality and transparency.
Right. So, I mean, here when we had the elections, there was data published in the papers as to how many people did vote from the north and the south, and what the turnout was, which wasn't very great. So I don't know whether it's something that maybe state-wise, because of the largest, like UP being such a large state, I don't know if that's one of the reasons, but
no, I think it's in phases. The election has happened in phases, and the reporting, I think they tried in the first phase, and then they revised the numbers so drastically. Everyone was like, how can that be?
Oh.
And then now in the second and third, they've just sort of clammed up and they're not saying anything.
Oh, I
No,
see.
when did Goa election happen? Which phase?
Which
It
stage
happened
do
on
you
the
know?
7th.
On the 7th.
Which phase was that? Third phase, was it?
I don't know.
Okay, I can look that up while you
Yeah.
say. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not
So
sure.
anyway, after the third phase or after the second phase, the EC changed the numbers after 11 days. Okay,
Yeah.
so numbers you saw in the newspapers were not the right numbers. It got changed after 11 days.
Okay.
And that's
So that
what
might,
the question is, how can it change? Because you saw the numbers right there, right, after the election. So how can they change? Who came along from space to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, there can be an error because somebody made an error, but then that has to be stated that what the error was, why it went up.
Yep.
It's like that 100 rupee. Oh, I'm sorry, I said 20 bucks for the eggs, but actually it's like 22. And so it changes everything. That's fine. But if you don't tell anyone, and for years on end, there's no clarification, then everyone's going to think, okay, is some change being perpetrated?
What's up? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, please carry on, Paloma.
yeah. So, yes, like, I mean, we had seen the data at one point. I don't know if it had changed after that, or it may have changed. And then, sorry, one second.
Yeah, sorry. So I just
Sorry.
looked it up. Goa was in the third phase.
Okay.
Mm.
So I think data is very important. And even though we say, like, everything's at your fingertips, the problem now also with the internet is that you don't know how or whether it's trustworthy or not. Like that, I think, is one of the biggest problems that we have now with AI, is that so much of what you see and so much of what is shared can be correct or it can be incorrect. And especially with like the older generation, they fall prey to a lot of misinformation. And I mean, I just don't know what to say on that point. It's just that, yes, we do need information, but we need verified information. And then again, how do you verify that it is verified information? Is such a huge question mark. And in India, people are so smart that so many scams and so much has happened. I mean, like, I think there's a state in the north where even the police won't go because it's so difficult to catch people. So I don't know. My thing is that, yes, information is important, and as a voter, you do need to know that information. But then again, verifying it becomes very difficult.
That's actually an excellent segue into the whole media discussion, which is that, when you are looking at politics, you're looking at the discourse around how you're governed, etc. The media has to be independent so that it can give you verified facts. So I'm going to let Sandeep jump in here. And
Yeah,
then
sure. On the question of morality, I think, since I've been following politics now and watching every move that is being made by each and every party and all that. So what I realized was the morality part got kind of left behind right when the government went ahead to pass a law in the parliament after having suspended 163 MPs, which allowed the CGI to be removed from the panel which is going to choose the next election commissioners. So you see, election commissioner is now being chosen by the prime minister, the leader of the opposition, and a minister appointed by the prime minister. That's 2:1 in any case. So that bit, the moment that happened where the CGI was supposed to be in place, he was removed by a move in the parliament. That itself gave away the whole morality game, because this is, and then if you continue, then till 2019, data was available. Till 2019 elections, general election data was available, where they gave you the constituency, they gave you the number of polls, the number of voters there, and they also gave you the number of votes polled and then the percentage, which disappeared this time in 2024. So now that totally raises your ears and antennas. What's going on? Till 2019, we were functioning normally. And as Amar was mentioning, right from childhood, it's been functioning well. We were not in the EVM stage. We were not in the kind of IT age that we are in today. We were doing the basic thappa wala, the paper ballot. And within 24 hours, data was available after polling stopped. But now, whereas we are on the electronic age, and with all these, we are unable to publish data, and we have to completely keep revising data 4 times, 5 times, and finally come out with a final figure 11 days later or 4 days later, which kind of totally changes the whole game. So you see, the morality part and this data part has been compromised from the word go. The moment the election commission, the choosing of the election commissioners, that entire procedure got changed, and it's basically 2:1, because the leader of the opposition, prime minister, and a minister from his cabinet who he appoints. So obviously he wins who's going to be the election commissioner. So that is totally disrupted. Therefore, ears and antennas all are up. Everything is looking in the red to me. And with what is happening, it is astounding. It is astounding. I only hope Supreme Court steps in at this stage and does something about it as far as our country is concerned. And it's happening around the world, though. It's in this kind of a scenario, and it's really being followed up here in India.
Okay, so we're going to enter now the last round of questions because we are aware that some of us have to go, Amar especially, who has requested time out. So I'm going to club some questions and then go around the table and let's just see who wants to comment about what. We've gone through a whole range of questions, but you know, some of us here are speaking quite openly about things, and some of us have also campaigned for various candidates. At least I know I have in the past. And Amar is also part of a particular party and things like that. And we're not hiding any of that. But what we are just asking now is that, is it, I mean, like, how do you feel about sticking your neck out, but quote unquote, in the political arena? Do you think it's something that you must do in today's day and age or not? And two, what is the type of development or the opportunities that we should pursue as Indians, which you feel is possibly you see very little of in the development discourse today? So, Amar, you can begin and you can go around.
Sorry, what was the second question? I didn't get
What
that.
are the sorts of development that we ought to pursue, or what are the sorts of things that you are not seeing in the discourse today that ought to be there?
Yeah. Okay, so as far as sticking your neck out for politics is concerned, and for the students, see, you don't need to be involved with active politics, yeah, but you need to be politically aware. You need to know what's happening around you, so you need to have discussions with people about your point of view. Too often these days, people with a point of view are either told to shut up or not, not express their point of view because either they don't feel confident enough in that point of view, or they don't feel, it is meaningful enough. However, I'd like you to speak about what your point of view is, because it's only when you start communicating your point of view do you know how it resonates with other people, and you know where you can correct it, and you know where the faults lie with your point of view. But you need to start putting your point of view across so you can start having that discussion. As far as development work is concerned, I think there are two really important critical factors that are happening in India today which need to be fixed. One we spoke about briefly were the inequalities, which need to be addressed. We need to have policies to check that. And second is, a lot of you may or may not be aware that, India's debt has gone up considerably over the last 10 years. And if I'm not mistaken, it's gone up about 3x or 4x. Yeah, that's okay. But what that means is it has to offset into something called capital formation, which is that more money is utilized, is pumped into the economy to generate more money. However, our capital formation rates are falling and have been falling for the last 10 years, which becomes very worrying given the fact that we're taking on more debt. If we were not taking on more debt, that it still be worrying, but it becomes even more worrying that we're taking on more debt and our capital formation is falling. It's like you take on debt to build your house, but but your house is not being economically utilized, and you keep building more and more into the house without it being utilized for anything, any economic value. So it leads only one way if you're not able to address it, and that's bankruptcy. I'm
Right.
not saying we're going to be near bankruptcy. First, what will happen is that it will constrain. You will have to pay your debts back. You will have to raise taxes. You will need to cut expenditure. Uh, and the last scenario is the debt default. But we are far away from that. We are not far away, but we are away from that. But we need to take corrective steps now so that this situation doesn't arise in the future.
Yeah, so you're saying really look at our economic report card if you're looking at development and look at it.
Capital formation, look at the bottom line, because way too often we get lost with the GDP, with the even GDP per capita, with this, with that, with that, with that. We get lost. We lose the basic uh, principle of if we are taking on debt, we need to increase capital formation that we're able to pay back the debt aram se. If we don't do that, the debt burden will sooner or later start strangling us. It's more likely sooner than later.
Right. Paloma.
So when it comes to like putting your neck out again, I think
You need to be louder.
so when it comes to like putting your neck out again, I don't think that you have to stand on a big soapbox and like, shout out. But I do think like discussion is important, and reading up about our past, our history, and understanding what is currently going on. So information, gathering information, and being more aware of the different policies and the different parties, that would help you to actually understand better rather than just listening to everybody else's opinion. So I think sometimes we tend to just listen to others rather than actually go into the information ourselves and understand it for ourselves. So that's my opinion on that. On the second point, I don't think I can comment. I don't know that much about it.
All right. No, but do you have anything that you wish to see in development discourse which you feel people don't talk enough about? You can think about it.
I'll think about it.
Yeah. All right. Sandeep, dear.
See, being politically educated, I would say, is an ideal situation to be in. Just being uneducated about the thing and what I was as I was growing up, so I can't really blame anybody right now. But being totally non-concerned about what is happening in politics is not the way to go, because sooner or later you will find out that you need to be educated about it and know exactly what's going on. Otherwise, it's going to impact you either way, whether you like it or not. Sticking your neck out is if it kind of rings your bell and you tend to look at politics in a way. If you get educated about it and you wish to stand by politics and maybe make a career in politics, then definitely stick your neck out. Otherwise, there are lots of sharp angles around available which can kind of chop that neck of yours. So you do that only and only if you are in that position to do so. As far as development is concerned, I would feel in India there's lots of talk of everything, but not really which is materialistic enough. So as far as economy is concerned, today's day and age, the world power comes basically from how well your economy is doing, not really how big your army is or how many planes you have or tanks you have, because that I think is becoming more and more redundant. And how your economy is playing out and how well it is defined, how well it's growing, how equally distributed amongst all societies, that is how the strength of a country is important. We don't talk about that at all. And we are just talking about, a few here and a few there and the downtrodden and the farmers. But if put together, and India's strength always was the domestic demand, which has kind of fallen way below the ground now. And that is exactly what is keeping us from wherever we need to go. And we are in the wrong direction. So therefore, getting that...
Also very low.
Sorry?
I said not only that, it's also FDI, which is only 1% of GDP at the moment, is what I'm told. So it's not, it's an overall sort of slowdown. For
Correct.
me, and perhaps this is, I know we need to end this now as well. For me, sticking on my neck out, yeah, I've done it once. And I remember me and another woman friend of mine, she wanted to stand for elections. And this was when this new party was being launched without taking names. And we did that in Sitapur, which is about the population of Ireland, which is one district. And she stood for elections there, and I tried to help her as much as possible. And I remember the number of people telling us, "You are good girls. What on earth are you doing in this dirty arena of politics? There are so many bad elements and criminals, and it's corrupt and what." And we were trying to say no, but we want to stand for everything that's not that. And hopefully, people who want to give people a chance will vote for us. But we didn't get anywhere. And it was a big wave that took over the country about 10 years ago that also drowned us. So we didn't do very well, but it was an amazing experience. And I think that, you may not be the actual candidate, but if you can do some of the research, if you can stay on top of the arguments, if you can help in that way, if you're educated, and if you, are someone who believes that you can lend your point of view to the discourse, then, do that in a public way. You can write, you can talk to your friends. There are many, many different ways in which you can participate in public life. So that having been said, for me, the one thing that I feel, I mean, for India, what is the vision? Yeah, as everyone lives in dignity, has a sense of well-being, etc. But also this idea of sustainable development. And I was recently very, very struck by something I read about a man sitting in Cambridge. His name is, what was his name again? Partha Dasgupta or something. And he talks about the economic development and how none of those indicators actually take the cost of the environment into development. So it's like saying that, look, going back to football matches, we are having a match and I'm tracking my performance based on how many goals I scored. But actually, you also have to track performance based on what is the other people scoring or how many self goals did I score. So you have to counter for all those things, and then you get your actual performance, right? So you can't go around saying that my GDP is so fantastic, if in fact, when you look outside the window, you see that you are destroying your environment and you're destroying the planet. So he's actually come up with this economic model where he says, you have to pay for that, put that into the cost of your products, and then look at development, which is far more sustainable, which doesn't consist of everybody buying sort of plastics and that going into the food chain. I mean, today they're saying, they're looking at the clots that are creating heart attacks. And if you look into those, they have microplastics in them, right? And plastics never degenerate, right? They will just become smaller and smaller and they enter the food chain and they harm everyone. So basically, there is a certain morality around saving our planet and a certain morality around what type of development that we should aspire for. And while in our country, of course, there are things we have to talk about around, income gaps, sorry, and, whether or not we want strong men in politics and whether or not, the poorest people are being included. But I think on top of that now, there's a very urgent need for us to look at the environment and at the planet. So, yeah, to me, I wish there would be more of that. In my husband, who used to be a Dutchman, in his country, they actually have an entire party that works around the environment. Their issue, their chief mudda, as we say in our country, their chief issue is the environment. So yeah, I mean, we've had parties in the at least I think it was a Congress party that did like the Women's Manifesto at one point. So we do think about gender and we do think about the larger things, but I think the largest thing right now is possibly the planet. I would like to see more of that discussion front and center in the discourse. So we stop there. Anybody got anything burning to say? Otherwise, it's just a big thank you to everyone. And thank you so much for doing this. It's an ongoing discussion, work in progress, etc. Everybody will find out.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah. Thank
you. It's time. So look forward.
Thank you, Madhvi. Thank you, Paloma.
Bye.
Bye, Amar. It was nice.
Bye.
Chat.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.